Hey there, and welcome to another Nerdy Reviews. I'm the Absolute Nerd, but you can also call me Briston. And today, we're going to be reviewing Mobile Suit Gundam 00. Also, I'll be reviewing in the same review too, the special edition movies alongside with Awakening of the Trailblazer. Now, before I begin with anything regarding this entire review, if you're watching this on Twitch, make sure to follow me on my Twitch account. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment down below. I want to hear from you guys. What did you think about this series? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? What did you thought about my opinions? I want to hear from you guys. Chime down below. That said, let's go ahead and jump into the review here. Like always, let's go ahead and just start off with the story for Gundam 00. So let me go ahead and start off with the story here. The story takes place in the year 2307 of the Amino Domino calendar. The organization known as Celestial Being declares to end all warring conflicts between nations by using their 4 Gundams in armed interventions throughout the world. That's the base level of the story, and it does evolve furthermore, especially since it's now divvied up between 2 seasons. I'll talk about that more too. First and foremost, I really want to talk about, before I get into like fun little trivia or anything like that, is that talking about what this Gundam series takes place in. It's in our actual calendar. It's in our year, or AD basically. It's funny, when I first heard about this series many years ago, like, oh, we're gonna get a Gundam series that takes place in our time, and in our like timeline, our AD calendar, right? And I was like, oh, sweet, awesome. So when do they predict that we're gonna have Gundams or mobile suits? And I'm like, it's gonna be anytime soon? It's gonna be now? It's gonna be now? And then they go, it's 2307. So you telling me there's a chance? Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had to say it that way because it was a really cool idea that they're going to bring Gundams into our timeline. Of course, I don't think it's going to happen, obviously, but I think it's just kind of a fun thought and a fun idea to really bring into our world and trying to bring a little bit more realism to that. But when I talk about realism, it's kind of hard with Gundam in general. I mean, you already have to imagine about giant robots, but I think some of the things that they portray here in Gundam 00 might make that kind of a far shot. Anyways, let me give you guys some fun little trivia factors here too. So this is the first Gundam series to actually be animated in widescreen and in HD. Now, there are other Gundam series after this, fact of the matter, that are done in HD, or like with our previous reviews with Seed and Seed Destiny, where they got HD remasters as well. But this is the very first Gundam series that started off in HD and in the widescreen format. The animation for this series is fantastic. It is top-notch, very crisp, very clear. I love a lot of the contrasty lines alongside with the animation and coloring itself. There is usage of CGI in here too, mostly with the ships and then some of the weapon effects, mostly with the GN particles. But it doesn't take away, it doesn't make you feel like, oh, I'm watching like a 3D thing in a 2D world. No, you don't really get any of that. It feels all aligned with each other. It does give a little bit more emphasis on some other types of like dimensionalization, you know, between like the 3D and the 2D, but it's nothing super distracting. Like I would always refer to is Gundam Origin. Now, aside from the animation, the music in this series is superb. Great music in this series. I think the only time I didn't really care for the music is the openings and endings. Much of them are they're okay songs. I didn't really care for them, but the series actual music, so the music that are used for the action sequences, the music that's used for dialogues, and of course just for the overall story, fantastic, really well used, gives a lot of that atmosphere and tone to this entire series. Very enjoyable, very enthralling, and very involving. Now, the dubbing in the series is one of, if not one of the best dubbings for the Gundam franchise. I think a lot of the voice actors and actresses fits their characters so very, very well. Great casting. Surprisingly enough, too, that several of the, like, not several, but some of these voice actors came from Seed and Seed Destiny. When I had complained about some of their voice acting before, this is a great example where they find the characters and they put them with, or they find the voice actors and actresses that have a good voice still, They're fantastic. They're fantastic actors and actresses. They have great voices. And then instead of putting into characters where they just don't fit that well, they put them into characters that fit very well with them. So this is a really good example of that. But yeah, really enjoyed a lot of the voice acting in English. I also can say the same thing for the Japanese voice actors and actresses too. Albeit, though, Japanese is a little bit odd. Now, I can only speak about the Japanese because I watched the SE movies or special edition movies, which are only in Japanese and subtitled in English. So a lot of the Japanese voice actors and actresses are obviously there because it's a compilation movie. So I get to hear everybody again from the entire series in the movie formats. The only issue I have is that some of the characters just doesn't sound that great. One I can think of off the top of my head is Lock-On Stratus. Lock-On Stratus his voice actor in English is fantastic. Fits him very well, and it fits so in tone with his character and his mannerisms. In the Japanese version, though, or the Japanese dubbing, or yeah, dubbing, I guess, it doesn't fit him that well. It doesn't sound that great as Lock-On Stratus, and I just had an overall issue with like a lot of this tones that Lock-On would have, or like this emphasis about his character or like his past history and stuff like that. And I just feel like the Japanese actor doesn't really portray or capture a lot of his emotions, unlike his American counterpart. So that or English counterpart. I can't say American because I believe they're Canadian voice actors, if I'm not mistaken. So they're English counterparts. But other than that, I mean, like there's only some voice actors and actresses I didn't care for in the Japanese dubbing versus the English dubbing. But overall, I think both of them did fantastic overall. Now, some other fun things here too. This is the first Gundam series that does take a seasonal approach. If you are familiar with anime, you're going to know what the seasonal approach is. They break up the series. It could be like a 26 episode series or a 50 episode series, depending on how you really look at it, into 2 seasons or multiple seasons. So this is the first Gundam series to actually do this. Originally, Gundam series like this, because Gundam 00 is a 50 episode series, but they broke it up into 2 different parts. So at this point here, we have the first season at 25 episodes, and then you have the second season, which is the next 25 episodes. I really don't like that necessarily. I'm not a huge fan of this seasonal break stuff, and I just prefer to watch my series as an ongoing kind of a thing. I guess they really just want to do it to fit in with the way that Japanese anime is put on television and broadcasted, so I guess that makes sense, but I didn't really care for it. The only thing I really could say about the whole seasonal break is that I did like how it's a differentiation between the first and second seasons, because they utilize a lot of these time skips. This is another series in the Gundam franchise that utilizes time skips. I think that it's very fascinating and interesting because usually when it comes to a time skip in the Gundam franchise, usually it's done in a sequel series or a sequel movie, but not within the series itself. Sometimes we might get a small time skip that's very, very negligently mentioned, like, oh, it's been a month later, or like some time has passed, like 8th MS Team mentioning about, like, you know, it's been a month or so since this incident. Very subtle, very light. Gundam 00 does not hide the fact of the matter that it utilizes time skips. The most notable one here, and not really of a big spoiler or not, is between seasons 1 and 2. There is a big gap between seasons 1 and 2, but there's also time skips in between the time frames from, like, you know, in season 1 and then in season 2 as well. So they do utilize a lot of these time skip moments. Other than the time skipping portions too, I really enjoyed a lot of the pacing and the story overall. The series does a fantastic job of balancing out between the story, our characters, and the action. We get a lot of equalization in the run times of the episodes, and although there's some issues I have with it, and I'll talk a little bit more too, but for the most part, everything is found in a right balance. I think the only time I would say that there isn't an equal balance, so most of it in season 1, great job, because we find a lot of time between talking about what's going on in the story, getting to know our characters and building our characters, and of course the incredible action that we see in every single episode. That kind of changes a little bit when we get to second season. Second season then stops talking more about the stops talking about the story really, and it becomes more driven by the action. We still get character development stuff and time with our characters, but most of the story kind of gets like backlogged, and what we get is a lot of character development alongside with action. And that's what strings second season along. And especially towards the very end of second season just felt very rushed at the end. At the very end, I'd say like the last 3 to 4 episodes felt kind of rushed. Now, when I talk about the story too with Gundam 00, much of it is a very politicized story, dealing with our different nations alongside with celestial being. We deal with the political beliefs alongside with the moral beliefs of our characters as well. Many fans and many people who have watched the series, and I would attest to this too, would say that this is very much similar to Gundam Wing. However, this is where my opinion deviates from other opinions I've seen online or heard from others too, where they say that this is a much more polished version of Wing, where it's not really confusing or convoluted, and it's much more straightforward with the politics and everything. I happen to disagree with that one there. I think that Wing's politics and the way that they told it in that story makes more sense. You can check out my review on Gundam Wing itself too. But just to really capsize on that one, the convolutedness, well, it's only at the very beginning, and much of the confusion is to fit within the story itself and address what becomes a very critical issue when you deal with the talks about pacifism and war. Gundam Wing utilizes the confusion to really hone in on between this hypocrisy of like, hey, we want to fight for peace, but we're going to use the same tools to fight for that peace, and how they justify that. Wing does a great job, a fantastic job of explaining this. Gundam 00, though, has a little bit of an issue with that one. Particularly, we see this much more in the second season, kind of like what I was mentioning earlier on. I feel like 00, kind of like when they come across that situation of like, well, celestial being is using armed interventions to stop war, but they're causing war themselves, or causing conflict themselves. So what do you do about that? And the series kind of really not really addresses it, and they kind of just sweep it under the rug, kind of a thing. And that's where I say like the story kind of like slows down or hinders itself in second season. Kind of comes up to that issue, and it doesn't really revolve around a story so much because of this trying to explain or get over the hypocritical fact of the matter. Whereas Gundam Wing tackles that right on, I feel that Gundam 00 does not tackle this on, and it causes some issues within second season. Slows it down a little bit, but pretty much what causes you to get out of that little slump is literally the action. The action is going to pull you out of this little political fiasco, this political conundrum, and drive it through with the action. Another thing I really want to talk about too, about Gundam 00, and I think this is really fascinating. Now, this is where I say it's fascinating because we get this throughout the entire Gundam franchise in this religious aspects. Throughout the entire Gundam franchise, we see moments of like they mentioning about like, you know, like religious aspects between like God or like biblical references. I really want to dive into this subject when I do like a Gundam theory thing or whatnot, because like for an example, Gundam Seed has references of Joshua and some other biblical kind of things like the Archangel itself and the Archangel and so forth. You got other things that kind of show up throughout the entire Gundam franchise itself as well, but usually those are very subtle undertones, very not out forward about that one, and you kind of really have to dig or know the information behind. But we get a lot more of these subtle texts of religious tones or aspects in the Gundam series or Gundam franchise. Gundam 00, though, however, is very overt with the religious tones. In fact, it plays very pivotal and key for some of our characters, such as Setsuna. But a lot of the religious tones in Gundam 00 can be very overt with characters like Setsuna, as I mentioned, or it can be very subtle things. Some things, and I'll just throw it out there just so when you get a chance to watch and look around, maybe it'll be fun for you to explore and learn, such as Veda, Ribbon's allegory to Satan, Paradise Falls, even Celestial Being themselves. I think these are like some like fun little things I just want to throw at you guys. I'm going to talk a little bit more in the spoilers section, but it's really fascinating how they really want to tackle this on, and they add this into the series, and they really emphasize a lot of it too. Something we have not seen in the Gundam franchise thus far. Now, I've already talked about this part a little bit too, giving a hint, but the action in this series is simply amazing, top notch. Every single episode is very action packed. It brings a lot of this fun dynamics to the fights too. Again, this is where we say it's very similar to Wing, because a lot of the fighting, it depends, and it's ever changing with the tides of power switching between the sides. So it's very exciting to watch. It's not as one-sided at first. Well, starts off very one-sided, and it quickly changes from that point. So I think that's a really fun thing about Gundam 00. And it's ever consistent throughout the seasons. Between seasons 1 and 2, I don't think any of the action sequences ever really disappointed me. There are some that I wish that had lasted a little bit longer, or we got more out of the fights between certain characters because of like the development of the stories and like coming to a crescendo of their like conflicting arcs and stuff like that. But I find that a lot of the action goes really, really fun. It's something that you would not miss out on Gundam 00. Definitely a driving point here. With that said, on Gundam 00, there isn't a whole lot that I want to talk beyond that one there. So, without spoiling a lot, because I do have some portions in Gundam 00 I really, really want to talk about, but it is going to spoil it for you folks. So, I'm going to give you guys a spoiler alert warning right now. Go ahead and skip forward. I'm going to let you know right now. The next time I will be stopping off, you can just skip past the favorite suits. And when I get to the new Gundam segment, or you're new to the Gundam segment. How do I put that again? I'm new to the Gundam franchise. Should I watch this first? Yeah, that segment right there. Go ahead and skip there. Just make sure to keep an eye out for the smaller banner to disappear. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about the spoiler parts. I want to talk about Gundam 00. There's a lot of cool things I really did enjoy about Gundam 00 I really want to talk about, and don't feel right spoiling it for those who just don't want to get spoilers, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is the world politics, the stage that Gundam 00 sets up. I find it very interesting and fascinating how they utilize, at the time, world politics, and then try to revolve it around of how it's structured around, you know, what's going on in universe. So in this case here, because of the orbital elevators being developed, we have like partnerships between nations creating their own like segregation of each other. Each one has their own faction. So we have 3 separate factions, or 3 nations at this point, because of these orbital elevators. We have basically, it's like America versus Europe versus China, Russia. And I thought it was kind of interesting how everyone kind of got grouped up or segregated in that way. And what it creates is 3 different world perspectives. And what we get is like, you know, we get the United States perspective. We're trying to do our own little thing, kind of like grubby and capitalistic in some manner and form too. You get the European front, which is most of what we see in the European front area is mostly of the Middle Eastern, like Kazakhstan and stuff like that, with Marina. And am I saying it Kazakhstan? I think I'm saying it correctly here. And a little bit of Krugis before its absolute demise. But we see a lot of the past history between Krugis and Kazakhstan. And I can't remember if it was Kazakhstan. I apologize for this, but I just think it's fascinating that instead of really focusing on like kind of like the British perspective or anything like that, or like the upper European areas, we're focusing more like the Middle East areas basically, and that's where a lot of the conflict or warring that we see, this undeveloped portions or warring portions happen. And then we also get the China-Russia aspect, so we get this I want to say like communistic aspects. Well, you get the communistic aspects, but it's very much like a power struggle between, you know, Russia, China, and the United States. And then you kind of have this in between where all the conflict takes place. So I think it's just kind of fun and fascinating to see, like, you have your two sides, and then you have the middle conflict, and that's where a lot of the fighting takes place too. So I thought, yeah, it was just interesting how they utilize the world politics and frame it in such a way. Alongside with that framing of the world politics, the whole utilization of child soldiers is very unique to Gundam 00. Not saying that child soldiers is absolutely unique to Gundam 00, because we have seen child soldiers in the Gundam franchise. Depending on how you want to phrase a child soldier, I think of a child soldier as a child who was literally raised up to fight as a soldier. So, I mean, some people would see like child soldiers such as like Amuro or the crew of the White Base, or anybody after that fact matter, because most of them are teenagers or kids that are being involved in war. I don't consider that necessarily as child soldiers, but they are children in war, or children that become soldiers. But when I think of child soldiers, I'm trying to think back as hard as I can, and I haven't further research into this, but the closest one I can think so far right now in the Gundam franchise that I can remember up to this point, closest one is Hiroyui from Gundam Wing. He is a legitimate child soldier. He fought in wars as a child and was used as a soldier. So we have seen Gundam soldiers, or child soldiers, in the Gundam franchise, but 00 takes us to a higher point. They utilize child soldiers to really emphasize a lot with the world politics, and a lot alongside with the politics or the hatred or the terror or horrors of war. Again, emphasizing on the core aspects of the Gundam franchise. They do so, or at least in this case, Gundam 00 does this through the four main characters. They are all children or child soldiers in and of themselves. I'll explain, and I'll briefly break it down too. Tyria is the most loosest form of a child soldier, because he is an Innovate that was created to create conflict. Yes, we do know that Tyria is working with Celestial Being to stop conflict, but in his efforts to stop conflict, he is creating conflict. He is a child soldier after all, in some sense. Alleluia, or Hallelujah, or Alleluia, Hallelujah, however you want to put those two together, is quite literally a child soldier genetically engineered. He is a super soldier built in this way and form, and he tells his side of the story alongside with a bunch of other, or representing many other super soldier children. Very much so, again, like I want to talk back to previous Gundam series, it's almost harkening back to like cyber new types with children like Peru, or with other cyber new types like I want to say anybody from ZZ, but they're not really children. Most of them are adults, so can't really count them. But my point being though is that seeing cyber new types being utilized, I could think back to 4, but 4 was more of a teenager. I can't really count as a child soldier, maybe. I don't know. I think child soldier, I'm thinking like very, very young. Peru is the first one that comes to my mind, and she was genetically engineered to be a cyber new type. Dare I say cloned as well. That's the fact of the matter. Same thing with Peru 2. I'm gonna throw that out there. But same here with Alleluia. Alleluia is a child soldier engineered to be the perfect soldier. Lock-on Stratus is another example of another child soldier, but he's a different perspective. He is a child affected by the conflicts started by many different factions, or in this case, I can't remember the faction, the Irish faction versus Middle Eastern factions, such as the one that Setsuna was involved in. But he is a child soldier because of these conflicts that impacted his life directly, his family directly, and causing him to inadvertently grow up and be involved in these situations. So he became a child soldier growing up into it, wanting to fight against these horrors, or fighting against those that had harmed him. And of course, Setsuna is the most base level of child soldiers. He's the literal child soldier. He's not like Alleluia, Hallelujah, where he was genetically modified. In fact, he is just like any actual child soldier that we might see today, in today's era, which do happen. Children that are brainwashed to believe in either a different belief perspective or a religious perspective to fight for a cause in a conflict or a war. It's absolutely horrible, absolutely terrifying, and absolutely despicable, because we see what it has done to Setsuna himself, and it's creating a lot of this long-lasting regret for this character. So I thought it was kind of fascinating that they kind of dived into these characters, and you can see in these kind of perspective of the child soldier. And throughout the series, we see how them develop as characters and talk more about what had led them to here, and furthermore from that point. Another fun one I want to talk about too, and we don't see these kind of characters pop up previously. They're more frequent as of like the more 90s-esque Gundam series going forward into the 2000s. It's a character trope that we see from time to time, and it is the Warmonger, right? Now, when I talk about Gundam 00, for those who've watched this, you know exactly who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Alial Sanchez. He is a absolute brute and savage of a character, very direct in wanting to cause conflict for the sake of causing conflict. I bring up the Warmonger trope because it's very unique with the Gundam franchise. Most of the time with this Warmonger, though, we've seen it in a few of the Gundam series, but not really fully flushed out, and they had their purposes within the context of like thematic things. Alial Sanchez doesn't fit this though. So trying to dial back down here, other characters I refer back to, number one I would refer to is Dorothy Catalonia from Gundam Wing. But she is not this direct brute. She's very indirect about causing war and conflict. She's a character that's enamored with war, enamored with fighting, enamored with people dying for their causes and their beliefs, because it generates a new, how do I put this, a new way of thinking, a new way of going about things, and presenting in what war can actually build. She's on the spectrum that war is not bad. It's that perspective of destruction creates, not absolute destruction is destruction. So that's where Dorothy comes from, and she brings that perspective into Gundam Wing. However, there is flaws with her character, both as a writing perspective and flaws with her within the universe itself, because her own morality about how she perceives war. And that's addressed in Gundam Wing. I'm not going to dive too much into that one, though. But what's important about her is that she is a warmonger, though. She's the one that incites conflict and desires more conflict. Another character we see later on in the Gundam franchise is Gingingham from Turn A. But he's, again, very similar to Alial Sanchez, but from a different perspective. He's the being from a samurai-esque family that longs to have conflict, because that's what they were meant to be. That's what soldiers are meant for, is for war, for conflict. What do soldiers do when there is no conflict? What makes a soldier if there is no war? Those sort of things. Gingingham brings that to Turn A and brings a lot of that perspective with him. He's a very direct and a confrontational character himself, and he desires and wants to bring fighting to what's going on in the universe of Turn A. But he is not so much so as a absolute destroyer. It's just that how he was brought up, how he was raised, and how he was as a character. Not so much so as like, I want to fight for the sake of like, I want to kill and stuff like that. This is where I mosey on down to Alial Sanchez. He's a different perspective of the Warbringer trope so far in the Gundam franchise. He's a character that absolutely is enthralled, enamored, and desires and craves war. He fights for the sake of fighting and causing harm and pain towards others. He's a unique kind of a character, and mostly a plot device himself. He's just used to push a lot of things going forward. He's the one that causes a lot of conflicts and a lot of deaths throughout the entire series itself, too. Again, when I talk about him, he's very different from Dorothy and Gingham, because both of those characters have something to represent. But Alial doesn't have anything to represent. If anything else, that his kind of trope that brings into the franchise is the absolute, that pure darkness of wanting conflict for the sake of conflict, the deeper innate human desire for fighting and conflict, and really relishing in that. I think that that's something very unique to the Gundam franchise. We haven't seen this in any other character thus far. And I think All Y'all Such just really brings it to the most finest boil. He's like the diamond of this trope here. So I'm not that I like this character, but I just find him very, very fascinating and very different than what I've seen so far throughout what we've gone through in the entire Gundam franchise at this point. So I think it was just really worth noting and talking about him as he introduces something brand new, a brand new trope to the Gundam franchise. Another thing I want to talk about spoiler-wise is Saji. Now, I want to talk particularly, this is all Season 1 stuff I'm talking about here. A little bit, the All Y'all is both Season 1 and 2. But Saji, I want to tell you guys a fun story here. So, I had watched Gundam 00 way back in 2009, 2010, when, so I was lucky enough, so here's what we have here. I watched these on the Blu-ray here from Right Stuff. I do actually have the Anime Legends on DVD, when it was released many years ago. Now, with the Anime Legends one, I watched it with a friend of mine. And she and I plowed through some Gundam series together, and we were having some fun and laughs and enjoying Gundam as it is. But nothing was much more fun than when we were watching Gundam 00, and all I have to say that we both were terrible people. When we were watching Gundam 00, because, you know, you were introduced to so many characters. We have a huge cast in Gundam 00. But one particular cast member was the most awkward of them all, and that's Saji Crossroads. Saji is a civilian, and we follow him and Louise Havitley throughout their life and how they are kind of involved in this world. They provide us that civilian perspective. So we got from political aspects, from political leaders or other characters such as like Sergei and stuff like that. We got the Gundamizers and the crew of the Ptoleminos, to show us like perspectives from the war front itself, and now we got characters from the civilian side, and with that we got, of course, Saji. When I say that my friend and I are terrible people, we were literally watching Gundam 00, and I'm like, why is Saji, like, of course I've never seen Gundam 00 at that point, so I'm like, why is Saji here? What is his point? Is he just trying to show us like the civilian perspective, the negligence of people about the world around him and stuff like that? Which that's what his character was. And my friend and I were just being very, very terrible people, and we were just really calling out like all the terrible things that were going to happen to Saji. I'm like, oh, okay, so let me guess. We're going to bring in Saji here. Oh, it's like he's going to have this nice, cute girl with him and stuff like that, and he's going to try and go about his life, and then things are going to go bad. Like, later on, we were introduced to Luis's mother, and I'm like, why are we having so much time with her mother? You know what? They're going to kill her. They're going to kill they're going to kill Luis's mother, and then it's just gonna rub Luis and Saji a whole horrible way. Lo and behold, I believe it was like episode 13 or so, I can't remember, I have to look back to it, but Luis's mother dies, and that happens, and we were kind of laughing about it, and we were like, oh my god, we called that. And it going from that point on, we were calling so many things that were going to happen to Saji and Luis from that point onwards. Like, oh, okay, so that, oh, I think I was actually before that too. I was like, oh yeah, his sister's like in the news reporter. Oh man, I've heard about horrible stories about news reporters who dig too deep into a story that they shouldn't be digging in are going to die. Guess what we called? And we were laughing at the same time. I was like, we're terrible people. I can't believe that we called it. But that's the thing about with Saji and his story with Luis, is that his is very cliched. It's super callable. I would almost say if like anybody who watches, I would almost challenge you, like, did you kind of call it out like we did? We practically called every single thing bad that could happen to Saji and Luis. We called it. And by second season, we even joked about this. We joked about this so hard, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, you know what's gonna absolutely happen? I bet you, like we were like joking about this, like almost like we were saying, I can't remember who said this though, but it was like one of us said that Saji is gonna somehow end up with Celestial Being, like that's ever gonna happen. Right, but he's gonna end up with Celestial Being. He's gonna fight with them and stuff like that, and he's gonna be the whiny little nagging person about pacifism and stuff like that. He's gonna be like Marina 2.0. And then Luis, she's gonna come back because she couldn't put the ring back on, so she's gonna like somehow become like a soldier when she'll have like a metal hand or whatnot, and then she's gonna fight in a mobile suit. I can't believe we called that. Minus Luis's metal hand, you know, we thought she's gonna get like cybernetics or something like that, because we didn't see anything else beyond the series that showed like anybody getting completely healed, but her getting her hand back and all that jazz was kind of a surprise. But we weren't far off from that call out, so I thought that was pretty funny. I just want to share you guys that story. I think it's hilariously bad how cliched and predictable Saji's storyline is alongside with Luis's, but at the same time, if you're a horrible person, you like myself and my friend, you could probably call what's gonna happen. It's totally awesome. Another character I want to talk about too was Marina. Again, sticking to season 1 here, Marina was a character that's very much like Relina Peacecraft, and I think she served her point in the first season. Honestly, by second season, I think we shouldn't even really bothered with her, even though Kazatosan gets destroyed and stuff like, or amalgamated into the Alliance or Federation. I forgot what they switch, but I really feel like Marina's story was really told mostly in the first season. That fits in with the whole like arc between like the European front, the Middle East stuff. I think that was perfect. She fits her points, and she really hits home with Setsuna and builds off with his character at that point too. I thought she should be done at that point. Never really brought back. A lot of people would compare Marina to Relina, and some have said that Marina is better than Relina, and I go like, no, this is, again, I don't agree with that. Relina serves her purpose, and she not only does that, but she constantly shifts her purposes and her characters, staying true to the tone of pacifism, but changing herself. Marina is a one-trick pony where she talks about, peace and stuff like that, but she seemed like a really terrible, like, queen or ruler. She didn't know what she was supposed to do or what she needs to be doing. It doesn't seem like a person that should really be leading people. And she's just constantly talking about like peace and not trying to create conflict, but she doesn't really bring much to the table past season 1. Yes, she and Setsuna have like some kind of weird awkward relationship, and they kind of fourth wall break that a bit and kind of like, you guys have a relationship? It's like, no, we don't. But they kind of like have some like subtle like passive relationship that's not really noticeable. I don't know why they really want to bring Marina back. They say, like, I know people would say, like, yes, well, her song with the children is trying to encourage people to stop fighting and stuff like, and bring the world together. I'm like, they did that in exposition. What more could we have done that as exposition and not include Marina? I felt a lot of her scenes could have been cut out and taken out from the series to focus more towards a lot of other things in season 2. Such as giving more time to refine that last 4 episodes, because the last 4 episodes just got really, really cattywampus. I didn't really like it a lot. But that's what I wanted to talk about Marina. I think she's a poorer version of Relina Peacecraft. She does have some of her points, but it's not to the finer point like Relina has. And that's not to say that I like Relina. I hate Relina Peacecraft, and I want to be very, very clear too. I hate a lot of the pacifistic characters in Gundam, because they tend to be very hypocritical of themselves and hypocritical of the situation overall. But I will be talking about one particular pacifistic character. For those in the spoiler section, know exactly what I am talking about. No, it's not much of a spoiler, but I'll be talking about Saji when we talk about a little bit of season 2. I got one more thing here for season 1. I'll jump into season 2. And then with season 1, I actually want to bring that up with tying him to season 2 as well. So, Patrick Colesour. He's a character you want to love to hate, but you still love him at the same time. So, Patrick has that stupid plot armor shield, like the highest caliber. I would almost say like it rivals that of Kira's and Hiroyui's plot armor. But man, it's really funny. He's like the Team Rocket of this entire series. He shows up, runs his mouth, tries to do something, then he blasts off again. Quite literally. I think it's even funnier in season 2, episode 15, when Kati mentions about Patrick. Like Patrick's like, why am I being out there as a sortie and all that stuff like that? Oh well, I just want to use and abuse your invulnerability, Patrick. And I thought that was the most craziest thing. I've never seen a fourth wall breakage in a Gundam series or in the Gundam franchise ever until that one episode. I thought that was really, really funny, and it's a very, very subtle fourth wall breaking about mentioning about plot armor. And I was like, wow, the directors actually get that far. They actually attempted to say like, oh, this character, he's got plot armor, and there's no way he's ever gonna die. And I thought that was really, really funny. Nice little nod. But yeah, I wanted to just talk a little bit about Patrick, because he was like he's one of those characters I absolutely love to hate, and I loved him too, because he's that incorrigible little scamp that just won't go away. And as annoying as he is, he's just like, I'm kind of glad that he's there. I enjoyed Patrick, despite some of the things that he did I did not like. Going into season 2, spoilers too. So I want to talk about how season 2. So it's kind of funny. A lot of these more not recent, but at this time frame, a lot of the AU series tends to borrow a lot from previous series. In my previous reviews for Seed and Seed Destiny, they borrowed heavily from the original Gundam and from Zeta Gundam. You can almost argue at some points Wing to some extent when it comes to the politics in Destiny. 00 doesn't shy away from that too, but Double is mostly original on its own. However, first season kind of copies off and bites off quite a bit from Gundam Wing. The second season, however, kind of bites a little bit more so from Zeta Gundam. I mentioned about Zeta Gundam because, much like the Titans, A-Laws are basically the Titans of Gundam 00. With the A-Laws, though, and it's kind of funny, like, I've seen some conversations regarding, like, how the Titans and A-Laws are exactly the same, and I would argue a little bit of a difference here, just a smidgen of a difference. And that's primarily their root basis as an organization or a faction. At the most base level root for the Titans is a group based on hatred, based on this innate, not a desire, but an innate hatred towards space noids and the Xeon remnants. That's why the Titans were created after Operation Stardust, and they pursued about going about their ways using that might makes right kind of a thing, and then terrorizing colonists and oppressing space noids. That's them, and it's very much a very deep-rooted hatred. A-Laws, on the other hand, though, is much more of a broader perspective of might makes right, and we can be jerks about it. It's a little bit different than Titans, and I feel like Titans are a lot worse than the A-Laws, as much as A-Laws have done some pretty horrendous things, right? We see that in 00. I think that Titans is a lot worse of a group compared to the A-Laws, because Titans base everything on hatred, and their absolute hatred of space noids, their attacks and their abuse towards them, and then even the abuse of cyber new types. You could kind of say the same thing with the A-Laws, but the A-Laws never really dive into the whole super soldier stuff. Not really. Yes, they use some Apiras, but that's not a huge thing. But A-Laws are pretty dickish organization. I'm just gonna be flat out about that one. I also want to talk about how, like, the A-Laws is like another portion of the Titans, but instead of like where Titans, as seen in Zeta Gundam, they never really succeed in what they were trying to do. A-Laws is the what if the Titans succeed, right? What if the Federation or the Alliance gave the Titans the carte blanche, the keys to the world? And that's what happened with that. I thought that was kind of a cool what if, and it was kind of scary when that was first announced midway through second season. But the problem with that was that it was so short-lived. I felt like it was a shame that we didn't really get to see the A-Laws go even furthermore with what they wanted to do or what they can do. What it amounts to was like, oh, the Earth's Alliance now announces that we're going to be giving all the power to A-Laws, since they are the ones that are helping us and protecting us and all that stuff like that. And then we get into this huge final fight between A-Laws and Celestial Being, and then other factions such as Catharon. But after that fight, it just felt like it was nothing. It didn't amount to anything else, and the A-Laws were crushed when the A-Laws are supposed to be part of the Alliance now. So it was kind of confusing, and it was a little bit weird. Like, oh, all of a sudden, okay, A-Laws are no more. A-Laws are done. And the way that they did it was just so they can make way, so they can go into this Innovate Arc. And that's the next thing I want to kind of talk about. But before I talk about the Innovate Arc itself, I just found that it was kind of a shame that, just like the Titans themselves, I mean, the Titans, we got like a whole lot more with them in Zeta Gundam. In the A-Laws, while we got majority of the series with them, I felt like we were quickly brushed off, despite that we have spent so much time and effort building them up as an organization, a terrible organization, and so easily defeated. We don't get no like final final grandiose fight that staggers throughout or anything like that. No, they came in with a loud bark and they left with a whimper, is what it was. So it's a little bit disappointing right there. I think it was an absolute waste. Sorry. So next thing I kind of want to talk about when it comes to second season, and like I was already alluding to, was the Innovate Arc, right? The final arc in this entire series. And I don't know how to really... I've already kind of alluded towards what I felt about it, which was that I felt it was very rushed. From A-Laws being quickly destroyed and dismantled almost to get to the Innovates. And the Innovate Arc was already short as it was. I think it starts off like not even like episode 49, even though the Innovates have been around since second season, like the beginning of second season, but the heaviest focus were in the last 9 to 10 episodes. And the problem I have with that one, though, was that everything was super rushed. Like, they just didn't have enough time. And it's kind of funny because this entire series, I think I've only notated that there were only like 1 or 2 clip episodes. And here's the funny thing about those clip episodes is that they actually weren't really clip episodes because it had a lot of new footage in there. Like it could have been an episode on its own, but they do recap things that had happened previously in the first season. So the series had its time. And I think it just ran out of time trying to tell the story about the Innovates or get to the point with the Innovates. And too long with A-Laws. I don't know what had happened right there, but it was so short-lived with the Innovates and their goals and their objectives, or in this case, Ribbon's objectives. I like that he was the villain, though, and it was revealed that by the end of season 1, but it just felt like he didn't really get to do a whole lot. He was just sitting there. I like my masterminding, scheming kind of a characters, right? Like I enjoy like Littlefingers and stuff like that, but I felt like Ribbons really didn't get to do a whole lot. And his interactions were like basically the last few episodes. And I was like, really? Even though you kind of pulled the strings at some parts of the series, you didn't really get to do a whole lot. And I was kind of a little ashamed about that. I felt like maybe like the last few episodes definitely could have used like 2 more episodes to really develop the ending. But it just came by way too fast, especially how like the final episodes like alludes to the movie and stuff like that. And I just didn't like how it was so abrupt. I'll talk more about the ending itself too. Wasn't a fantastic finale to this series, in my opinion. One thing I really did like about the Innovate Arc, and more so just about the Innovates themselves, it goes right back to what I was talking about in the beginning, towards the beginning of this video, or like midway through it at least, as the whole religious aspects of this series. And it's quite literally, the Innovates are angels and Ribbons is Satan. Satan, the devil, Lucifer, however you want to call him, but that's basically it. His allegory is of them. Aeolia Shimberg is basically God, or basically a human playing God, because he's quite literally creating a new humanity. That was his whole plan all along for this entire series. It's to create or evolve human beings into innovators to have the dialogues that come. He's quite literally playing God. There's a lot of characters that play God at times, but he's the equivalent of that. And as this God, he creates the Innovates to basically enact upon his plans to foresee and facilitate those actions. Just like how God created angels to basically be his instruments of divinity and action. So it's very, very similar between, like God, Aeolia, angels, and the Innovates. And then specifically with the angels and the Innovates part, we have we have Lucifer, Satan. I just call him Satan. That's like the easiest way. It makes me think of Mr. Satan from Dragon Ball Z. But Satan. And then we have Ribbons. Both of them are very similar, and just the really for those who are not familiar with the Bible or anything like that, but Lucifer, who took so much pride in what he is because he's an angel of this level of perfection, wanted to create his own kind of visage or whatnot, and went against God's will, trying to do his own things because of his own perception of perfection. Because of him going against God, led to his literal downfall, becoming the fallen angel, and then his eventual ruling over hell, or creating his own world, which is hell itself too. That's just capsizing. I'm not going to go into this whole biblical stuff or whatnot. I don't care too much, but I just think it's kind of fascinating how they play along and they tie along or make a lot of these allegories to each other. So with Ribbons is pretty much just like Satan. Aeolia Shinberg created Innovates. He is one of the Innovate models that were created to facilitate Aeolia's ideologies and to pursue creating the Innovators. But unlike anybody else, he sees himself, just like the Innovates, to be a far superior being than humans, and that he should be more cherished than the humans. And he thinks that his creator was wrong, and he wants to create his own world. Does that not sound familiar to Satan? I don't know what does. But he tries to create his own world, or in this case, he's going to create our own living hell. So I thought it was kind of really fascinating how there's these like ties in here within the Gundam universe. I mean, we've never seen anything like this in the franchise overall. And they try to tie this in here and create this parallels, like biblical parallels between Ribbons and Satan and God and angels and stuff like that. I thought that was really, really cool, really, really neat. This is just me touching the iceberg of this, like touching that little tip. There's so much more beyond that one too. And that's what I also want to kind of mention too. One thing I mentioned earlier on was Veda. And I kind of thought it was kind of funny too, because with Veda, it was like, okay, so it's like this knowledge thing. The one thing I got from Veda was the whole tree of forbidden knowledge, right? It's funny with the Innovates because their sexuality is their, I don't know how to say it's not sexuality, because they do describe themselves as male and female, but their genderization, or the way that we can view their gender, is very skewed, because a lot of them are very effeminate features. Be it that they're the male or female counterparts, they're very effeminate. Tyria is a great example of this, where like you see Tyria and like if you didn't know better, you'd think that Tyria was a girl, but he's not. He's a he. He's a guy. And vice versa with him is Regina. They look almost identically the same, but she is a she and Tyria is a he. But what I want to bring about is that the whole thing with the Veda, and the Veda is a tree of knowledge. So based on this one right here, and it's funny, I wrote this down too. So Veda is a Sanskrit word for knowledge or wisdom. So I wasn't far off from that to begin with. Veda itself is the system that they use to gain knowledge, or has extensive knowledge around the world, and the Gundammeisters, the machines of the world, those sort of things. And with this tree of knowledge, this Veda, kind of again goes right back to the whole biblical perspective. And I'll tell a big brief story of Genesis, mostly the end part, at least dealing with the tree. Is that in the story of Genesis, the book, or the tree of forbidden fruit, was there, stated that like God said, like, you can enjoy my world, but you cannot have a fruit of my forbidden tree. I forgot if there's any other, but basically, it is a woman that is tempted by the snake, or in the actual stories of Eve, tempted by Satan to take a bite of this fruit of knowledge, and therein being enticing Adam to take a bite of this fruit. And they do so as well, and then they are eventually purged out of Eden itself. Very similar, and this is just me scraping along here. I'm pretty sure there's something much more deeper to this, but very similar to that story right there of Genesis. We have Alexander, who in the special edition movies, it's hinted heavily that he has a relationship with Ribbons. It is an effeminate looking man too. So, and women is from the rib of Adam, so it's not necessarily that they're truly different necessarily. But and you could take it into an allegory too about like who took a bite of the apple too. Was it really Eve or was it Adam? But it was Adam, or sorry, Alexander, that was tempted by Ribbons to eventually get to and take Veda for himself, to control all this vast power and knowledge and literally kill God, Aeolia Shinberg. And then his fall from grace, right? His being casted from Eden, because it is then Ribbons who casts him aside and basically lets Alexander die. So I think it's like interesting parallels. Again, we see like the first subset of parallels mostly with the Innovates. Now we see this other subset in season 1, or at the very end of season 1. So I just thought that was some really, really cool things I wanted to talk about regarding the religious aspects of 00. So other things I wanted to talk about, there's a couple more things I want to talk about season 2 at least, is particularly Saji. I'm going to come right back to Saji again. Now, like I mentioned before, I really hate pacifistic characters because I find them very hypocritical about who they are and how they go about things and how they perceive the world around them. Saji's no different at the beginning. I really hated him at the beginning of season 2 because when he comes in here, he immediately finds out that, oh, Setsuna is part of celestial being. It's you guys' fault. You guys are starting all these fights and these wars, and we didn't have to fight this. And because of all your fighting, poor little me and Luis got involved and stuff like that. And I'm like, and you weren't caring about the world around you. That you didn't realize that in your perfect little world that there was already fights happening across continents. And you have no acknowledgement of this, yet you ignore it. And you only cared about it when it impacts you. And then your only response to that is to blame others but yourself. And then when you take no action for it, you continue to blame others and not yourself. Right, that is the most privileged thing I've ever heard from, like, mostly from these pacifistic characters to say. And it's very frustrating to hear when pacifistic characters, or I would say like people in real life too, because I come across this many times myself, telling you how things should be, but they don't have the real perspective of what's really going on in the world around them. Their only perception of the world is what they perceive it to be, and not what is really going on in the world. So that's again another, in a little nutshell, perceptions of these kind of pacifistic characters and how frustrating and irritating they are, and a little bit of Saji, because that's what we get in the very beginning in season 2 with Saji. However, despite how whiny, hypocritical, and ignorant that he is as a character, he's not one that doesn't learn, though. Unlike most other characters that we come across that are like Saji, he's actually one of the few characters that actually learns from his mistakes and learns more about the world around him and actually takes some level of an action. Though he is still whiny to the levels of Shinji. I like it that his name is Saji, but she's like Shinji from Neo Genesis Evangelion. He takes that perspective of being whiny and whatnot and slowly changes to go from like, okay, I don't agree with fighting. I'm not going to fight myself, but I'm going to try and help and fight in my own way. After he had made some really, really bad and critical blunders himself. I think there was one thing that surprised me the most about Saji is in one of the episodes. This seems like something that Katz would definitely do or something like that. Not that he's a pacifistic character. But unlike other characters, there's a moment in Gundam 00 where Saji was going to take the 00 Riser to go chase after Luis to talk to her and stuff like that. And then just as he's about to do it, he thought about what happened to the Catharon people. When he talked in what he felt was absolute confidence that he would never get squelched on or get in trouble for, and when he talked to Sergei about where the Catharon people were hiding. Yeah, your stupidity cost people's lives. Lots of people's lives. And it's kind of surprising that he actually realizes this. And just before he even takes the 00 riser, like to the flight, he thinks back to that. And it's a really good poignant moment of using a flashback. And I love how they did that. And it hits so much home with his character. And I was like, oh my God, he actually learned. He isn't going to do something stupid that we normally would see in the entire Gundam franchise. Usually a character in his position would do exactly what we think he was going to do. And for the first time when I was watching it for the first time for Gundam 00 and my friend too, the first time Saji broke cliche. He broke character almost for us. Because he was fitting the cliche of this annoying, whiny, privileged character. And he learned, and he realizes, and I remember I sat there, like, oh my God, he actually learned. He actually is changing as a little bit of a, just even almost fractional portion. He's changing as a character. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. That's some pretty solid writing, and that floored me that moment when I had watched it with Saji, because up until that moment, I hated Saji. I absolutely hated Saji. Not saying that scene redeemed him completely, but it changed how I perceived Saji from that point. And then, of course, his future actions, which is him helping Setsuna more, being more involved with Celestial Being in a more pacifistic way. He's not going to fight directly, but he's going to help, right? He's going to pilot the 00 riser. He's going to try and reach out to Luis, even though it's a selfish thing that he's doing, though, but at the same time, hopefully stopping her from fighting too. So I thought that was some fascinating things, some interesting things, and a little bit of a redemption for Saji. Otherwise, if he kept going the way he would have been right up there with my top tier hated characters in the Gundam franchise. Redeems himself, not entirely, but he redeems himself, and he really changes my perspective on like the writing in Gundam itself. Like, I mean, we get different writers, of course, but I was just like surprised to see that he changed as a character. So that's awesome. He redeemed himself in some manner or form. He redeemed himself in my eyes. Now, last thing I want to talk about when it comes to season 2 is the final episode. This is gonna be flat out spoilers for the most part, I think. But I mean, we're already in spoiler section. But so first and foremost, the fighting, cool. I love a lot of the fighting. And you get some really, really cool last moment moves from like Lyle. I thought that was super cool. Like, it's like, Haro, how much time do I have left in my Trans Am? You got 1 second. And I'm like, dude, what is he gonna do in 1 second to finish off? It wasn't Hilling that he was fighting. It was is it Revive? I think Revival. I think is who he was fighting at the time, because Hilling was killed by Alleluia, if I'm not mistaken here. But that split second is all he needed, and it was like quite literally like a Toro moment, like a matador against a bull, and just like flips right around Revive, and then just like shanks and blasts with his GN pistol. I thought that was amazing. I'm like, one of the cooler moments in a Gundam fight I have seen. I'm like, dang, that caught me off guard. I was like, dang, that was so cool. And even on the rewatch, it is still absolutely amazing. I was like, I forgot about that scene. I remember back then, and I rewatched, and I'm like, yeah, came right back to me. Like, oh my God, definitely gonna keep that down. Like, that was a really awesome moment. It's also kind of cool too. This is the very first time in the entire Gundam franchise where the main protagonist and the antagonist not only abandon their new, super cool, upgraded suits for the final fight, but they fight each other in the original suits that they originally piloted. Ribbons pilots the O Gundam after stealing a GN reactor, GN drive from the O Riser, and Setsuna takes the remaining drive and puts it into his old Exia Gundam, and they duke it out. Not only was that a first time, and it was a cool fight itself, albeit very, very short, very, very short. It's very poignant, though. Again, it was going with the entire series, again with the whole biblical aspects and stuff like that too, Setsuna, who had originally had seen the O Gundam and wanting to be a Gundam himself in the sense too, how it ended war, ended a conflict, but saw the O Gundam like an angel, this deity thing, this godlike thing, right? And then of course Ribbons absorbing in his egotism and his pride and going like, yes, view me, I am the perfect being here, and I'm higher than you, and I'm only gonna let you live just because you relish me as so. You deserve to live. And that was kind of poignant, because then it was in the beginning of the series, we kind of get that in flashbacks, and then it comes to here where Setsuna's like, there is no God, there is no religion or whatnot, and he sees Ribbons not as this angelic figure, no, or this deity, no. He sees Ribbons as a faulty, flawed being that must be destroyed. And I thought that was kind of funny. Like, it begins with the O Gundam and it ends with the O Gundam. Exia cuts it down to Ribbons. Well, not really cuts it down to Ribbons, just one good strike. But still, I thought that was really, really poignant with Setsuna's character and finishing it off between Setsuna and Ribbons in that manner. It was really, really cool. I like that, how they've written that in there. Other than that, the ending episode kind of ends very abruptly. I didn't like that. It ends very abruptly. We kind of got a little bit of the fight and all that jazz, and it stops. I felt like there could be a little bit more development in between the time frames of the fights and stuff like that. Like, one more episode could have done it in. That final fight between him and Ribbons, and then it's like the cut between after the Reborns, Gundam and 00 Riser were completely screwed at that point, and then moving on to their older Gundams. I felt that it was a really bad cut. Like, it quickly cut to them two like doing this when it requires time. Moving the drives, they're not an easy feat, and then installing them too. I get it, they're trying to cut it for the sake of the episode itself, but I just felt that was really bad. This reminds me of like cuts that you would see in a compilation movie. A compilation movie. This is a series, folks. We're seeing this in a compilation movie cut in a series. I don't think that was a really good choice there. I get that they were squeezing for time and they're trying to finish up the final episode, but it could have gone for another episode or something like that. I also like how it just did not really have an epilogue at all. We didn't get any epilogue, other than at the very end of the episode, it gives us like, coming soon, the movie for 00 and the dialogues to come, that sort of thing. It was kind of disappointing. Kind of disappointing right there. I don't know how to react to that, to be honest. But that's all I really want to say about 00 when it comes to like the spoiler aspects. I do want to get to my next segment here. I'm going to keep up with the spoilers though. Is my favorite suits of the series, or just talking about the suits of the series itself. So those of you who are not familiar with this segment here, basically with every single Gundam series that's introduced or brought into the Gundam franchise, we get a slew of like new suits, designs, redesigns, battleships, those sort of things. 00 is no exception to the fact of the matter, because we get a ton of brand new suits. We do get some not redesigns, but a lot of homage designs to like Xeon-esque, like Mono Eye stuff and things like that. That said, though, I mean, I didn't really care for a lot of the suits in this series. A lot of them were just kind of They weren't really that great looking and stuff like that. Not that impressive. I do want to maybe say like the Jinx is kind of cool, but not enough for me to go like, yeah. So, I mean, like, it's a little bit disappointing here with the suit design, suit choices for this series. Granted, the fighting was really cool with them. But I just want to kind of start off, I want to just bring up at least one honorable mention, because I just feel like it's kind of a lazy cut, but it's an homage to the original Gundam. Now, when we see the O Gundam here, it's actually in its O Gundam colors here, the actual deployment colors, which is, again, if you look at it, it's basically the original Gundam. I really like the design. I like the little harken back to it. It's just a redesign of the original Gundam brought into the 00 world. I thought it was kind of cool. a beginning and an end, essentially. So it's a really neat base level suit. I just want to say it's an honorable mention. It's not one of my top tier favorites, because I would rather pick the original Gundam over the O Gundam, but it's a really cool design. I like a lot of it too. I do want to say though, with the 00 suits, a lot of them have really cool like design and features to them. I like a lot of the details that go into a lot of these suits. You're gonna see that as we keep going through the suits here. But my first suit that I really did like in this series here is the GN Archer. I thought this is one of the more unique mobile suits in this series here. It's how do I put it? Like, most of the time we see a lot of Gundams and mobile suits. They got a very emasculating look to them. Not often do we come across a feminine mobile suit or a feminine-based Gundams. We do have some of them, but not by a whole lot. So this adds into their very effeminate-looking mobile suit. And I actually really do dig a lot of the sleek designs, the I want to call it like jagged curvatures to this suit here. It does transform, so it's another one thing that I do like about it too, because you know me, I love my transforming mobile suits. Really, really cool. I also like how it docks the Arios in later on episodes once we do get the Arios out and rolling. I think it's a really just neat and nifty looking design. Super cool mobile suit. I like it a lot. My next one I like, and it pairs up with hers, I actually do like the Curious, because this is the upgraded Gundam for Alleluia. The only thing I don't like about the Gundam, and it's kind of weird, is I hate the kneecaps. It's got these huge like fins that stick out that are really, really annoying and ugly. But other than that, I really do like the overall design, its transformation too, and the weapons or its armaments that it has. Like when it transforms, it's like it's a much more cooler Wave Rider-esque looking suit, or like transformation or flight mode. I really like that a lot. Super cool. And then this thing, which is its shield, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's not the shield, it's the wings. It can open up and crush things, so I thought that was really, really cool. Again, like it a lot. Cool suit. We're gonna come down to my final two for this series here, but I really, really like the Exia Gundam. What's the rollout colors? I'm kind of curious. It's not the same. Oh, okay. But I really love the Exia Gundam. From the first time we see it to the very end of the series too, I just love it for its simplicity. It's a in-your-face kind of a Gundam. It's got blades, blades, blades. That's all I gotta say. Between its GN sword, where is that GN sword? Like, we get the GN sword, which is like a cool, like somewhat of a shield too, and then it pops up to be a sword. It can pop down to be its little beam rifle. Not beam rifle. Is it a beam rifle? It's like a beam gun. Okay, let's just put it that way. And then it's got this GN blade that's on the sides of it. Really, really cool. It's like physical blades. And then you got more beams. You got more blades up. It's got beam sabers itself too. So it's got all these blades. It's a very close, in-your-face kind of a Gundam. Again, when I talk about detail and tech and like details and whatnot, I really love a lot of the detail on this Gundam. It feels kind of bare bonesy, but at the same time, it's got a lot of power and meat behind it. So it's just a really cool. One thing I don't like about the design, the one thing I don't like about it, is what in the world do these stupid little fins do? Like, when it doesn't deploy, we've only seen it like a couple of times in the series where it just like deploys down, and then when it's ready to deploy, it raises up. I'm like, what does it do? Is it supposed to be kind of like windbreaker kind of stuff, like a spoiler on a car? I couldn't really figure out what's the purpose of those. I thought it kind of looked cheesy and goofy, but I tried to think of the realistic usage of this Gundam itself and the realism in the series too. Like, if it's a suit that's supposed to be very, very fast and up close, the point of like a spoiler or fins is to like make it a little bit more aerodynamic, a little bit more controlled, keep it more grounded. So maybe like the fins are supposed to help it like not to break out the wind and allow it to traverse faster across like a lower plane or something. I'm not entirely certain, but that's what I can only assume based on limited knowledge I have and understanding about aerodynamics and like the utilization of like spoilers or fins on like cars and airplanes and stuff like that. But That's what my thoughts on it. But I still like the Exia Gundam in its armor. It's a really cool looking Gundam. But if I'm going to talk about my favorite Gundam or suit in this entire series, Double O Riser. I would almost say the Double O, but I between the Double O and Double O Riser, I just liked it with the Riser this backpack or jetpack on it, because it gives it a lot more emphasis on the looks of itself. So very much functions similar to the Exia, but it's more of a mid-range suit. So it has like some really cool weapons. Let me see, like the sword rifle. That is its sword rifle, which then can turn into a sword itself. Kind of cool, just like how the first GN blade was. And then later on, it gets this sword too, which it functions as both a blade and a gun at the same time. And I'm like, this is such a cool suit. The wing binders can actually be used as in unison with the GN sword to create a gigantic beam saber. And I'm like, what? That's so cool. Very versatile, very fast, very formidable with its twin GN drive. So I really liked the Double O Riser. It's a really cool suit. But that's all I wanted to say about the Double O suits. So let me go ahead and just do this here for our stream watchers and for future, well, YouTube watchers as well too. So hopefully you guys have returned back or stopped off at this point here. I am no longer talking about spoilers. So I want to talk about the next little segment I like to talk about, which is, I'm new to the Gundam franchise. Should I watch Gundam 00 first? Yes. Actually, yes. This is one of the top tier Gundam series I would highly recommend to watch first, amongst many other series I do recommend. This is a very easily accessible series that's self-contained in and of itself, and utilizes a lot of the core elements of the Gundam franchise, and is basically a nice little foray or entry point into the Gundam series, or Gundam franchise, because it's something that you can see consistent with other Gundam series as well. Albeit it's not as highly politicized or whatnot and with some of the other series, but it's a very good entry point nonetheless. So yes, I do recommend this if you are new to the Gundam franchise. Check out Gundam 00. Now, as for a overall, Gundam 00 is a sleek and fun Gundam series. I find it that it has an appropriate balance between the story, the characters, and the action to tell a very evolving political conflict with religious undertones. There are moments in this series that can get a little bit clunky and a little bit overtly preachy and slow, akin to what we see in first season, and then of course a little bit clunkiness in second season. But even though it kind of loses out its steam and momentum from those points, most of it doesn't stop the series in its entirety, as it is carried on by the intense and incredible action sequences and enthralling story. Mobile Suit Gundam 00 gets a 4 out of 5. I definitely recommend this Gundam series to anybody in general. It's a very, again, like I mentioned, an accessible series. It's a very fun watch, very, very enjoyable. Great gate entryway point for the Gundam franchise. My only ifs and points I have about it are just, there's some moments where it gets slow in the story. It can get a little bit preachy at times too. And, for those who want more of a story, I mean, it doesn't have the story, but sometimes it gets strung along by action primarily, especially in second season. But other than that, it's a great series. I cannot not recommend this series. More than enough. That said too, we're not done with this review because we still got 2 more things to review here. I'm not going to go too much on the second thing I'll be talking about here, which is going to be I don't have it. I apologize. But I'm going to be talking about the special edition movies. Now, real quick with the special edition movies, there isn't anything too special about them. They are quite literally a 3-part, hour and about 35-minute episode, movie each of the series. They're compilation movies. The first movie covers the first season, while the latter 2 movies covers second season. It covers one half of it and the other covers the other half. It's could be a little bit awkward when I say it that way, but there's not much else different about that. The story is exactly the same as we're aware about that regarding celestial beings' involvement around the world. Just like many other compilation movies, these movies are no more different than what we're familiar with compilation movies. They have a tendency to cut a lot of episodes, cut a lot of subplots or major plots too. A lot of the character dialogue and involvements or stories around the characters have been either boiled down to nothing or reduced. And we're just more of a higher focus on certain aspects of it, mostly around the key elements that happen in the series, alongside with key focuses on certain characters. That being said, though, one thing that's kind of not entirely unique to Gundam 00 is that we do get some newer scenes. Some of the newer scenes that we do get in Gundam 00 is mostly of Ribbons and really establishing him as the main villain from the very beginning. We also get some newer scenes regarding fight sequences or reorganization of that, but not by a whole lot. There's not much. I'll probably do like another Gundam. What's a Gundam difference between the series and the movies? But I kind of highlighted most of the pivotal points here. I'll just talk about some of the things that I had primarily issues with these three movies. So the first and foremost, like I mentioned, it takes a lot of the character subplots and episodes out of it. Now that's kind of fine for the most part because we're condensing a 50 episode series into 4 hours, 4.5 hours basically. 4 hours and 45 minutes because they're an hour and 35 minutes each. And the problem I have with that though is that what makes 00 a very enjoyable series is the characters themselves. So a lot of characters, stories, or sub-stories or subplots get absolutely axed from here. A lot of Sumeragi's stuff, a lot of Somapira's, Sergei, even the Gundamizers themselves too, they have a lot of their portions taken out. Unless it's relevant to the plot of the story itself, it is taken out. It is completely removed. And I think that's what made the series really, really enjoyable. So they try to boil it down to just that. It's not so great, especially if you're new to watching Gundam and you're trying to watch this for the first time. The other thing that was an issue with this too was that the pacing of the movies themselves. It gets very, very clunky and very choppy at parts. I think one that was really noticeable that I saw was like towards the beginning of the movie, like I think it was like the first 5 minutes. We get the scene where Setsuna's fighting against Graham Aker, and then it immediately cuts to a fight sequence between him and Sergei when they fought for the first time. And I thought that was a little just abrupt, and it was like, wait, what? I thought we were fighting Graham here, and now we're cutting to this. And it wasn't a montage sequence or anything like that. It was like a literal transitional cut to that. So I thought that was just very inappropriate. This happens multiple times throughout the entire 3 movies. And it makes it very, very clunky. Sure, the movies have a lot of action to them. They're fun to watch. But as for a story perspective or whatnot, it's a little bit of a mess. It's hard to follow through, especially with a lot of things being cut out of it. Much of the story is expositioned. So for someone who's never watched Gundam 00 before, you're going to have a hard time getting into the movies. Myself, after watching the series itself, or I think anybody else who's watched the 00 series itself, won't have that much of a hard time, but they're just going to be more of a letdown watching these movies because it cuts out a lot of the good meat from the series. Yes, we've trimmed off the fat, but there wasn't a lot of fat in Gundam 00 in my opinion. What we ended up chopping off is a lot of the meat, and all we got was just like one good bite maybe, and then a lot of bone. It was very, very disappointing at that point. Just to even get into it really quick too, is like if you're new to the Gundam, I'm new to the Gundam franchise. Should I watch the special edition? Oh, sorry, the special edition one. Let me put this up on the big screen for you folks here. Special edition movies. Should you watch this first? And I'm going to say no, do not watch the special edition movies first. You're better off watching the series. Start with these guys instead. You get a lot more out of it. And let me just get to my critical points about that again. So it's a choppy, very rough watch of a compilation of the series itself. It does not really adhere. It does have some of the core elements in there just because it's from the series itself, but it's very poorly advocated or portrayed. But the worst offender of all is that it sets a really bad expectation of going into the Gundam franchise. You're watching a cobbled up hodgepodge, hoppy choppy movies versus a very methodically told story. So no, don't watch this first. This is something I would not recommend to anybody that's new to the Gundam franchise. Skip this. Start with these instead. That said, as for an overall, the special edition movies for Gundam Seed is a shorthanded, clunky mess. It takes a lot of the elements that make the series really, really fun to watch and really enjoyable, and really just cuts that all away, just so we can fit within the 1 hour and 35-minute time frame. While the action is very heavy and fast in the movies, and there are some newer scenes added to it to add more to the story, in all honesty, it wasn't enough to redeem these movies as something that I would recommend to watch. Again, you are much better off watching the series than the special edition movies. If anything, just watching it for the newer scenes. That said, Mobile Suit Gundam 00 special edition movies gets not so great 2 out of 5. Now, we're almost done here, folks. I appreciate you guys sticking around and listening to me ramble here, but I got one more thing for us. That's the 00 movie. Yeah, so let's just dive right into it. Let me give you the gist for you guys who are on our non-spoiler section right here. The story for Awakening of the Trailblazer. It takes place in the year 2314. 2 years after the end of the series itself, the return of a derelict ship with unknown entities shakes the world into arms against a new threat, and Celestial Being and the 4 Gundam Meisters must intervene for the dialogues to come. This is a flat 2-hour-long movie. I'm surprised they managed to squeeze in quite a bit into this here, and I do have to say, and it says it right here on this box right. It is the first theatrical movie for Gundam in over 19 years. That's what it says on the box, folks. I say that because it's not far off. When it says 19 years, you would think like, well, didn't Gundam Wing Endless Waltz count? And here's the stipulation. It's the first new Gundam movie in 19 years that is not a compilation or an OVA, originally in that manner or form. So yes, the last time that we saw a Gundam movie in theaters was actually Gundam Wing Endless Waltz, but that was actually based off of an OVA, a 3-part OVA. So 00, the Awakening of a Trailblazer, is the first time an original Gundam movie was released. And for referential points too, previously the last few Gundam movies that were released theatrically that were original and not a compilation or an OVA was Char's Counterattack, F91, and I can't believe I have to remember and say this one. I wish I never had to mention this ever again. G-Savior. I'm actually surprised I got a theatrical release. I really am surprised I got a theatrical release, but it did. God help the souls that sat down in the theater to watch that, and I can only hope that they left that theater quicker than anything else after watching the first 5 minutes of that trash. Okay, enough about G-Saver, more about Awakening of the Trailblazer. So, right off the bat, what I want to talk about this movie is that it feels very much like a compilation movie. It's very fast-paced. It cuts very, very quickly at times. A lot of this movie, I felt like, could have been stretched out and given more time. Like, it could have been a season of its own. Like, 00 could have had a 3rd season, and it would have been Awakening of the Trailblazer. It's just, there was so much that was cut out. I feel like there was, like, moments of dialogue that we were missing out, and we only got like the key moments of those dialogues, key character development moments, and then key moments of telling the story or developing the story to push it along. I felt like there was so much more that we could have gone that the movie did not have the time to address. And it's just trying to go like bam, 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 plot point, and just moving along. Not necessarily that's entirely a bad thing, but I mean, there's some other things that do intersect with this where it hinders the movie a little bit for me, at least. For me, as I would say. Like, for an example, would be character deaths. And I'm not going to talk about it right here yet, but for character deaths, I feel like a lot of them, these are characters that we've seen from the series, or some of them are new characters too. But these character deaths are way too fast. They happen in a blink of an eye. You know, you blink, you missed it, kind of a thing. And for these characters who were pretty important characters in the series, I feel like their deaths just disrespected them, and we didn't get enough time or to acknowledge the importance of their death. With these deaths, and they just felt so short and all that. But the thing is that with these deaths, it felt like it would have been like one of those episodes in a series, in like any given series, where it would have been devoted around this character, and then their eventual demise at the end, or like midway through the episode, or something like that. So I felt like it was a big disservice to some of these characters that just died like that, and if you didn't pay attention, oh well, and we move along with the story. I just felt like it could have been done or handled a lot better. What can you do when you're trying to fit a lot in 2 hours? Now, with that 2 hours being said too, this movie has some of the most crazy and intense action. Just like it is in 00, the series itself, but just take that and dial it to an 11 instead. The action is incredibly fast-paced, intense, and in your face. It gets so much so at portions that it gets a little bit much for me, and I had to okay, let me step back a little bit. It's very, very like fast-paced, crazy. It reminds me like Bourne Identity level like speeds, but there's so much going on. It's a crazy good amount of fun action. I enjoyed it a lot, even though it overwhelmed me at times. Now, before I get to my spoiler section, I do want to say this, and it's not a spoiler, but heads up. For those of you who've never seen this movie before, there is post-credit scenes. I've never really seen this in a Gundam movie or anything else like that, with the exception of the 00 series. But at the end of the movie, don't stop it at the credits. Skip the credits, fast forward the credits, or watch through the credits. However you watch a movie, right? But stick around, because at the very end, there's still about 2 minutes of additional scenes that complete not just the movie, but the 00 series overall. So definitely stick around, watch that. That said, though, we're about to go into spoiler alert territory, folks. So for those who don't want to listen to this part here, go ahead and skip along in the video here. And again, once you see the banners off, I will be getting into talking about if you're new to the Gundam franchise, should you or should you not start with this first. So that's where we'll leave off here. Otherwise, let's go ahead and talk about some spoilers about the movie itself. So the first thing I want to talk about is that, oh my god, aliens. This is the first time we deal with aliens in the Gundam franchise entirely. It's kind of exciting because it's a different perspective, a different take, a different way of approaching the entire Gundam franchise. The even bigger difference too is that, you know how traditionally we see aliens in the sci-fi medium being like humanoid-based aliens for the most part, right? It was really nice and very refreshing to see the L's, the L's, aliens, are not humanoid, and that they are like this, like a very different type of an alien, this intangible entity that we could not communicate with. And I really like how they played with the whole communication aspect and really develop on that whole dialogues to come kind of thing. I thought that was really, really cool. I really enjoyed that. Again, being this abstract form, and their way of communicating was like fusing with with the entities that they're trying to communicate with, and almost looks like killing them. So I thought, I was like, how do you communicate with these things and not get into a conflict with them, right? And they are very formidable too. It seems like one of those like horde-esque movies where like there's an amassing swarm, there's nothing you can do, and it feels so hopeless. And it just gets really crazy with that. So I thought that was really cool and interesting how they brought that into the folds, especially with the actiony portions of this movie. One other thing I really liked about it is when they were first introduced too. So after the fragments of that derelict ship are destroyed and land on Earth, the whole entire movie, which was like mobile suits and like traditional Gundam, turned 180 into a completely different movie. It was like a scary movie at that point. Like the way that we were introduced to the L's, and like we were seeing like a ribbon metal clone and stuff like that. And then later on with Alleluia and Soma Pires, or Maria at this point, being chased down by like the vehicles and stuff like that L's were turning into. It was like becoming like a horror movie, and like Terminator meets Maximum Overdrive. For a moment, when I first had to watch this movie, I stopped and I go like, wait a second here. Did Stephen King just like came into the Japanese studio and like literally took over directing and writing of this portion of the movie? Because that's what it felt like to me. It was a very different movie, and I was like, am I watching a Gundam or am I watching a horror movie? And so I thought it was really cool. I really liked that, like that little tonal shift just for like that like 10 minutes of the movie, I believe. Very, very cool. I liked it a lot. It was very enjoyable. Now for the deaths, particularly I didn't care for Desmond Shaman. You don't even get his name that much in this movie, and his death was super forgettable. I was hoping that it was going to develop to be something, but nothing really developed from his death or whatever happened to him. We assume that he's dead at least. But the ones I would talk about particularly is Andre and Graham Aker. I want to talk about Andre first, since he's the first one that does die. This was a little bit of a difficulty for me because I hated him in the series. I hated him because he did not attempt to even talk to his father. He just hated his father, Sergei, for, being a soldier and letting his mother die and all that stuff, and not really truly understanding his father. And it goes right back to the whole communication aspect, that core element in the Gundam franchise. But as much as I didn't like him as a character, I didn't want to see him go because he was pretty pivotal and important in the series, and I felt like I wanted to see him stand out more. Now, his death when he was trying to sacrifice himself to prevent an L's esque ship from getting into Earth's atmosphere, that was a heroic sacrifice, but I just felt that, of course, it was like a blink and you miss it kind of a situation. It was a little more disrespect of his character, and I didn't like that. I didn't like him at all, but I think he deserved a little more screen time, and he only had like a few moments in the entire movie. So unless you really, for me, I finished watching Double O, I watched the special edition movies, and then I went into watching Awakening, and I know who I know who Andre was. If you hadn't watched the series in a while and you forgot who Andre was, or after he completes his arc, he's pretty much forgettable. But his appearance in the movie didn't really make sense or come off as great or anything like that. So I just felt like he deserved a little bit more screen time / making his death a little bit more grandiose. It felt like it could have been an episode where they were trying to stop the L ship from getting to Earth. And then by the very end, Andre figures it out and he sacrificed himself. So it felt like that, but in the movie, it was less than 30 seconds. So yeah, that was the one thing. Granted, I'm not sad that he died because I hated him, but I just still felt like he deserved more screen time, deserved to develop more or show more as a character since we grew with him in the series. That's my thoughts on that. The other character was Graham Aker. He was someone who was very prevalent throughout the entire series. It was depending on how you perceive him, a likable character for the most part too, albeit very extreme, fitting in with that warmonger trope. But it wasn't so much as a warmonger as much as a challenger, right? bloodthirsty Trace Cushionata. But Graham's death, while it was a good sacrifice, a heroic sacrifice, just like Andre in a sense too, it was one of those blink you miss it kind of moments. And though he did get definitely more screen time than Andre, I felt like we could have paid a little bit more attention to Graham Aker and his development. I just felt bad that like his death was very, very quick and didn't hold too much of a significance. It's what I would say is it's a real life kind of death. Both of them had like real life kind of deaths where someone was to die. You're not gonna imagine about all these like, oh my god, I flashback and I remember about this person. No. You're gonna react to the situation. So like Graham dies, not even a brief moment of like a lapse and like, oh my gosh, what had happened? And it just Setsuna and Tyria going into the L's ship. So that's pretty much it. I didn't want to see him go, but it was a useful, sacrificial, heroic death. The last one I want to talk about is the ending of this series. I know a lot of people get a little bit butthurt about the end of this movie. I actually liked it. I found it very poignant too. What I'm talking about is how the movie ends, like where all of a sudden Setsuna and Tyria take a like hyperdrive or whatever, or warp into the L's home world or whatnot. And then all of a sudden the planet, this L's planet, turns into a giant flower. I just thought it was kind of a shame that people got upset about that because it's really poignant. The L's a lot of people were frustrated with that ending because it's like, oh, it was so abrupt. We didn't get more out of it. We didn't get a real epilogue. That's the one thing I will ever argue with people, and I will agree with them, is that yes, we didn't get a true epilogue. But I think that whole turning into a flower was so much more significant than most people shrug it off to be, because the whole series has been about communication and developing these communications. And throughout the entire movie, we know that the elves can't communicate the way that humans would normally communicate. And it seems like they can communicate through like picture imagery and stuff like that. So the only way that they could have done it, or simplify peace, at least with the humans and the elves, was a flower. Like, flowers is peaceful and that kind of thing. That symbolism, that imagery was enough to convey what words could not, right? A simple image. And just like that, an image is worth 1,000 words, and words are what we needed to communicate at that point. So I thought that was kind of poignant right there. I just didn't like how we didn't get an epilogue at all. It frustrated me because 00, the series does not end with an epilogue. It ends off with like, this coming up summer, the movie, Awakening of the Trip, not like that, like, but you know, they just a quick little like teaser header, and that's about it. And I was like, really, that's all we get for an ending? I want to know what happened to the crew of the Tolominos. I want to know what happens to the 4 Gundamizers. What about Setsuna? Does he ever get what felt? It didn't seem like they would, but I don't know. Or no, sorry, that was at the end of this movie. But like, what happened with all of our characters? We grew with these characters. I want to see what happens in the end for them, not just an abrupt cut and a something of, yay, we win. I wanted to see something. So 00 does do this, or sorry, Awakening does do this with having like a 2-minute epilogue kind of a thing, and like we go, it's like past, present, future, almost like where we go into the past and we see Aeolia Shinberg talking to like EA Ray, which is like what was the basis for the ribbons type Innovate. And then later on, we fast forward more into the future. So 60 years. Was it 60 years or 50 years? I can't remember. Yeah, 50 years is what I have. 50 years into the future of after the events of Awakening. And we kind of see like some things, but really what we get is a closure of, and this is the closure I didn't really care about, but it's one of those, I get some closure and it's better than no closure, right? And it's closure between Setsuna and Marina. Marina is old and potentially blind, and Setsuna comes back in his forever eternal form, metalized by the L's, so he's like a metal version of himself, and they finally like, oh, we understand each other. And that was pretty much the ending, and I was like, this is it. 50 episodes, 3 compilation movies, and a very tightly packed in 2-hour movie. and we couldn't really get 5 minutes of epilogue amongst our entire cast of characters. So I was really, really frustrated about that, but I'm like, we got an ending at least, we got an epilogue, and here we are again with Marina, character I didn't really cared for. She was done since the first season. They bring her back constantly. They're not in a relationship, but I guess they're in a relationship. I don't know. I don't know, and I didn't care enough, and it's over. I really wanted to see what happened with everybody else. I really wanted to know what happened, other than they all die, because we all know all the characters are going to die, but I wanted to know what happened to Lock On, what happened to Miss Sumeragi, whatever happened to Alleluia and Maria, what happened to our characters. Okay, hold on. We do technically get what happened to Tyria, because he shows up an innovated body, I believe, but he's Veda now, so he's gonna be around forever. That's it. I got nothing else for that one there. I feel like that's a letdown, and I feel like that's a big, like, oh man, it sounds like Briston doesn't really like this movie. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed this movie. It's just that it was a letdown for the series overall. But other than that, I do want to get to my next segment here, and I want to talk about my favorite suits of the movie. For those who are not in the know here, with this segment here, with every single Gundam movie or series that gets introduced into the Gundam franchise, we are introduced to a whole new slew of suits, redesigns, battleships, those sort of things. Double O, the movie, though, doesn't really offer a whole lot of new, though. Mostly because this is a sequel movie, we're seeing a lot of familiar suits, but most of the things that we do see here are a lot of upgrades. So we do get some upgrades here that they're okay for the most part. I only a couple of suits from this entire series, and I'm sorry that the tabs are kind of giving it away. Oh wait, you can't really see it because of spoiler. Yes, unintentional blockage, but I didn't really care for a lot of the suits because they're the same suit designs that we see for the most part. Just of course, all the Gundams get upgrades, which are cool. But the first Gundam that I really like, and no spoiler, it is spoilers. I liked only the Gundams from this movie, but I like Gundam Zabanya. I thought it was really, really cool with all of its armaments and how those things acted like just like the funnels, it like the bits it was in the series, but it had more armaments. It did a lot more and carried out more than it could previously. It felt like a miniature powerhouse of its own, and it was a really cool suit to watch in action. I really enjoyed it a lot. I can't really say a whole lot about it. It's not much for me to really bring up. And of course, ever so briefly, I mean, I always thought that for the longest time the new Gundam was a shame because we don't get to see the new Gundam really perform as much. Same thing with the Zazavi. But if you want to talk about movie shame and it's a cool looking suit, look none other than the Double O Quant. The Double O Quant is a very cool looking suit. Its functionalities too, while short-lived that we got to see that it do, was really cool itself too. Unfortunately, we got like less than what? I want to say 5 minutes, but it feels like in between 5 to 10 minutes of seeing this suit in action. And that's not a whole lot. But it very much reminds me a lot of Exia Gundam, tied in with some little fun features with like the funnel bits or something like that, and like some of the weapons. It got really weird when it was quantizing or like quantizing to warp to the L's homeworld, and it looked like that. But that's just because it's prepping itself for the transfer. And then when it comes back, we only see this, like, not even a second, because we see this briefly and then it gets flowerized. Let me see if I have it in here. I think it's in one of my Gundam things. Yes, here we go. I mean, like, this is the best one I can show. And let me bring this up for you guys. Oh no, the page folder is coming out. The Gundam, let me see if I can get it to focus. Focus. There we go. The Gundam flowerizes. It turns into a bunch of flowers at the very end of the movie, just like it did in like in the ending credits. Basically, we see it like. Yep, that's pretty much it. So it's kind of sad we see the Quant just turn into flowers. Or flowerize, at least. But it was a cool suit. I liked it. Wish we could see more of it. But that's all I had to say about the suits from the Awakening of the Trailblazer movie, because there isn't a whole lot. Let me go ahead and alert our viewers here. We are no longer talking about spoilers. So, next thing I want to talk about, like I mentioned already, is I want to talk about one of our other segments here, which is I'm new to the Gundam franchise. Should I watch this movie first? If you can't already tell, I'll say it flat out. No, do not watch this movie first if this is the first time you're watching a Gundam movie. This is a sequel movie to a series that goes at the pace of a compilation movie. Yeah, you're gonna be able to still enjoy it because it's very actiony and it has some spooky moments, like creepy spooky moments. But a lot of what's going on might not make a whole lot of sense, and it's gonna set a very, very bad expectation about the Gundam franchise. So definitely do not start with this first. If you want to watch this one, definitely watch 00 first, then watch the movies, because that's how it should be done. But yeah, it's not something I would recommend you to watch first off. Not for your first foray into Gundam, no. But definitely check it out later on. It's a fun movie. Speaking of that being a fun movie, so for the overall, Awakening of the Trailblazer is a wild and fun ride that finally delivers on 00's promise of the dialogues to come. Though the movie does suffer through incredibly fast pace and cuts akin to a compilation movie, it manages to keep the overarching story and the characters in line with the incredibly intense and fast-paced action sequences. This is definitely a movie not to miss, since it does complete the story for Gundam 00 and is a fun, watchable movie. That said, Mobile Suit Gundam 00 Awakening of the Trailblazer gets a 4 out of 5. Again, Awakening of the Trailblazer is a very fun movie. I can't talk about how much I enjoyed it a lot, even though like a lot of my review was kind of trashing on it a bit. It's just because I really want to harp on some of the bigger parts, because honestly, the first hour and 20 minutes of this movie is mostly set up, and we get the actiony portions throughout it. We get that weird like horror movie moment for like 10 minutes of that. And then once the L's start coming around and all that stuff like that, that's where things just flip around and it becomes super actiony and crazy. That 40 minutes does not feel like 40 minutes, and it's just a fun ride overall. Cannot hype up the movie any more further than that. That being said, too, this is going to be the end of our review. I do appreciate you guys for sticking around for this very, very long review, like some of my other recent ones, too. But if you haven't already, if you are watching this on Twitch, make sure to follow me on my Twitch account here. You're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment down below. I want to hear from you guys. What did you think about Gundam 00 overall? Did you like the series? Did you not? What about the compilation movies? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Did you think they were absolute garbage too? Or not absolute garbage, but pretty trashy themselves? And what about the 00 movie, Awakening of the Trailblazer? Did you guys like it like I did? Did you have more complaints than I did? Did you not agree with how I saw certain things, especially like, you know, the ending or anything like that? I want to hear from you guys. Leave a comment down below. That said, I do want to thank you guys again for watching this live stream review. And until the next one, I will see you next time. Take care.